Welcome to the Twisted Libra Cemetery, where there is always life after death. Welcome to the cemetery, my lovelies. I am your delightfully wicked host, the Twisted Libra, and this is Craving the Darkness, the official podcast of the Twisted Libra Cemetery. Do you like dark things? Are you drawn to the macabre? Well, you, my friend, have come to the right place. Grab a seat on a tombstone and join me now as we take a look at today's topic, funeral lore. I'm sure most of you have been to a funeral before, but have you ever wondered where this ritual began? Why do we dress in black? Why do we send flowers? Why do we bury our dead? Now, the oldest known funeral rituals go back tens of thousands of years. Over the centuries, multiple traditions and practices have taken form. Ancient Egyptians were known to embalm and preserve their deceased. Ancient Greece treated funerals as large public events, complete with eulogies and processions. During the Middle Ages, funerals began to take on a more religious focus. Church services and prayers became the standard, and the funeral procession became a more central part of the event. Burials began taking place in consecrated church grounds versus regular plots of land. Still, how did we get to what we know of as today's funeral etiquette? Well, at least one major aspect of that came during the 19th century. You know, that deliciously dark Victorian era. So let's tackle the biggest tradition first, wearing black. We can thank the beloved Victorian era for this one. Now, the donning of black clothing for mourning actually began back in ancient Rome. Funeral goers would wear black togas as a show of respect for the deceased. During the Middle Ages, black clothing was viewed as a sign of wealth because dyed garments were costly to produce, so only the wealthy could afford them. Extravagant mourning attire was considered a display of status. Then in 1861, Queen Victoria chose to wear black for the rest of her life as a show of mourning for the loss of her husband, Prince Albert. This funeral attire was adopted by the wealthy as well as the working class, further spreading and solidifying this Western tradition. Society even created rules for how long mourning attire was to be worn after a death. Black became associated with the somber occasion of mourning, as well as a respect for the dead. It also made everyone appear equal, so no attention was taken away from the deceased. These days, not everyone wears black to a funeral, but many try to at least wear darker, less eye-catching clothing. I mean, come on, nobody wants a scene stealer at their last hurrah. So what about other traditions? Burial, flowers. How did we end up with an entire business devoted to funerals? The burial thing is fairly easy to figure out. Back before we understood the importance of embalming a corpse, the dead presented a rather pungent health hazard. A decaying body was a vector for disease, and the smell of rot was both nauseatingly unbearable and a beacon to hungry wild animals. Burial prevented the spread of disease and deterred any feral visitors. Now, over time, burial began to represent the final step in the religious journey to the great beyond. A body buried outside of consecrated ground, or worse yet, not buried at all, could not release the soul to ascend to heaven. That is why, as mentioned previously, the funeral procession to the grave became so significant. It was a profound show of laying the body to rest in the consecrated earth, so the soul could rise to the hereafter. The use of pallbearers to carry the casket to the grave had since been replaced with the horse-drawn carriage, and then the hearse. However, we still use pallbearers to transfer the casket from hearse to graveside. The tradition of the funeral procession is very much a part of society's mourning rituals. Oh, the irony of receiving a parade in your honor when you are no longer here to enjoy it. Flowers came about as a response to the overwhelming stench of decay. No, really. Even though the Egyptians had long since invented embalming, the modern world did not fully embrace this practice until much later. Here in the United States, embalming was not legally required until 1894, and only then just in Virginia. To cover the odors of rot and decay, flowers were placed on or near the corpse. After embalming became the legal standard, the flower-giving tradition remained. I suppose people enjoyed a hint of nature's beauty amongst the sorrow of sweet death divine. Now, in my opinion, one of the most interesting aspects of funeral lore is the evolution of the mortician. In the earlier days of Western civilization, grieving family members could become overwhelmed with all the tasks involved in preparing the corpse for the funeral. Often an individual would step in and undertake these tasks on the family's behalf. Hence, the undertaker came to be. What we now know of as the process of receiving friends was originally performed at the home of the family. Houses in those days were built with large parlors for entertaining guests. When someone died, the parlor was the gathering spot for mourners. As society downsized and homes were no longer built with large parlors, the aforementioned undertaker would remove the body from the home and take it to their own standalone space for viewing. A private parlor, a funeral parlor. The undertaker went from handling the arrangements and placing the flowers to conducting the embalming once the law made it mandatory. They were then more commonly known as morticians, which means one who prepares the dead for burial. Over the years, funeral services became a profitable business. Now, we have funeral directors who run funeral parlors full of embalmed corpses and pretty flowers, with a hearse at the ready. Sounds like a job to die for. Well, that buries that discussion. For now, anyways. I hope you enjoyed today's topic. If you did, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. You can also rate this show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can share the link with your friends. Feel free to come play with me in the cemetery at twistedlibrecemetery.com. All my wicked creations are buried there, but I can't swear to any embalming. Bring flowers just in case. I have a little something for every dark soul. Thank you so much for joining me today, my lovelies. Until next time.